Oh, what am I fanning myself with here? It's bookmarks for my ongoing Kickstarter, which is over 35 times funded. And if you would like to go ahead and check it out and see some additional covers I revealed for upcoming books, the link is in the description down below. But I'm not going to spend any more time on that. I know why you're here. It's for the tier list video. One quick announcement though for the channel. First, 2023, we're going to be cutting down the amount of output once again, because I'm going to be experimenting with probably doing 2 or 3 videos a week where I go far deeper into certain topics rather than trying to just get as many videos out as possible. This isn't exactly the best choice in terms of the algorithm. YouTube tends to reward high output, but I just want to be able to start covering topics more in depth, and having this time limit on me is preventing me from doing that. So we'll see how 2023 goes. Without any further ado, I'll at least give you the end of the year videos you know, you love, you enjoy, and that includes finishing off the biannual tier list of everything we've reviewed for 2022. But before we get into everything reviewed in the second half of the year, let's go ahead and clean up what we did in the first half of the year, because I did rearrange things a little bit. First, I have brought Berserk to the top. If you've kept up with the Berserk read-alongs, which yes, will be coming back in full force next week, you know I have come to view Berserk as one of the greatest fantasy series I have ever read. Elden Ring is still also near the top, while open world is not necessarily my preference for that type of game. It's so well executed that I have to just kind of like put that preference aside and admire the artistry of what that game is. Yes, I do really want to play the new God of War. Everyone keeps asking that. I don't have a PS5. Everything Everywhere All at Once is still my favorite movie I've seen this year so far, though I did bring Legends and Lattes a little bit higher because it sparked a love of slice of life fantasy that I didn't really know I had up until I read it, so I'm kind of giving it a little bit of extra credit there. Then we have Gunmetal Gods finishing it off. I also nudged up The Northman because I really enjoy that, as well as Perdido Street Station, and if you've noticed, The Dresden Show, it's enjoyably bad. It's my favorite of the C because, like, I don't know, it's schlocky and I like it for that reason. Fight me! And the only thing I wish I'd done is create an F tier just so I could put the Halo show in there. I really do not like that show. But I'm gonna go ahead and kick off the second half of the year reviews with Rings of Power, the forgetful of forgetful shows. The review that I titled the video of, it did not stick the landing. I kind of regret saying that because it did stick the landing if you consider the fact it never really took off. It's just formulaic and boring. In my opinion, that does make it a lesser show than Witcher or even that maligned Dresden Files show because it's so flavorless. I'd rather you have some kind of personality I don't necessarily love than no personality at all. And that's the big takeaway, especially now that I've been sitting on Rings of Power for a while, where it's just bland. Kicking things up a notch though, we actually have something that I feel like improved its source material and adaptation, which I talked about in my Invincible comic review, and that would be the Invincible show. And I'm actually going to put Invincible the show up in the A tier just below The Northman. It's a really, really fun, enjoyable show that has brought us maybe my favorite interpretation of the twisted Superman trope, and giving Mark as a character so much more time to develop in the show is one of the main reasons I think it's elevated above the comic. Character is hitting harder. The Lost Metal, one of my favorite reads of 2022 for sure. The way this is kind of bringing so much more of the Cosmere into the forefront is so well executed. It's like a better planned, more consistent version of the MCU. I'm seeing more and more people in my comment sections who even aren't necessarily big Sanderson fans talk about how you can just tell it's going to be so much bigger once, you know, the Mistborn adaptation that Sanderson's already talking about on his channel gets done. It's just an exciting time to be a Cosmere fan. For me, this is going to go just below Legends and Lattes, but definitely still a very firm S tier. You have to remember, these tier lists are purely enjoyment. This is just how much I enjoyed certain things. And yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed The Lost Metal. I think it is technically more impressive than Legends and Lattes, but Legends and Lattes is literally a heated blanket of a read. There is so few things more enjoyable than that. The Sandman show, something I thought was so strong in the beginning, but really began to falter at the end. There was just too many characters introduced at the end that weren't given enough time to develop. A lot of them were just like, we're quirky, but they're not gonna really contribute too much to the story. I just didn't love where it ended, but really liked where it started, though still look forward to season 2. And some of those standalone episodes that weren't necessarily tied into the wider plot were fantastic. The death episode, the continually meeting up with the immortal episode, those were some of my favorite episodes of television of 2022. But it then just sank The serial killer plotlines especially just didn't do it for me. So it's gonna average out to a B. Babel from Rebecca Kwong. This was a really fun dark academia fantasy entry. It's not sticking with me quite as much as some of the other books that I read this year, which is a sign that it could sink a little bit. I really love it when a book just sticks in my head and won't let go. So Babel's going to go just below The Northman. God, should I bring Perdido Street Station into A? It was so weird, and I really like that. I'm gonna bring it into A for weird. I love me some weird. Chainsaw Man! This was such a fun experience on the channel, going through Chainsaw Man with all those fans. It was a blast, and it changed how I viewed manga in a lot of ways, while still never being my favorite read. It was a fireworks show. It had some depth to it. There were some interesting themes around Dingy and his view of women, maternity, paternity, as well as a lot of commentary that actually kind of successfully landed towards the end about gun violence. I have been watching the show on and off a bit. It's not actually doing it as much for me as I think it is for a lot of other people. The animation especially is just kind of cool, but not super well pulled off. Anyway, for me, Chainsaw Man as a whole, I think will go top of B. I really liked it. It has a lot more value than I think I've seen some people give it online. Definitely has flaws though, and certain things I can point out and just go like, did not land. But in terms of hitting the palette differently, I'm gonna start recommending this to a lot of people who just wanna see what kind of left turns can be brought to the table with this medium. And yeah, Chainsaw Man is not necessarily a manga you should start with, but maybe is a good like first level up for a manga reader who wants something a bit more different. War of the Worlds, a literary classic we talked about here that held up surprisingly well, had a good amount of humor to it, and I think its influence was one of the most enjoyable things to see in hindsight. Like reading through War of the Worlds now, so much pulled from it. This shaped how aliens and contact stories would be written and talked about for decades to come, and it's a pillar of science fiction. It does have some angles that haven't aged great, especially towards the very beginning, if you know what I'm talking about, but it was a remarkably digestible read with humor that has held up a century later. That's not common at all, and I didn't remember that humor being there the first time I read it, so it was kind of cool seeing it second time through. I'm gonna put it just below Invincible, which I'm sure is gonna make some snob lose their goddamn mind. 1899, which I gave a brief review of-ish within the 1899 Didn't Steal Anything video I made, which I absolutely stand by, and I have yet to see someone who has both watched this show and read Black Silence agree with the author that 1899 took from her, and the show as a whole kept me engaged beginning to end. It wasn't my favorite show of the year, and the ending made me go, Season 2's got a lot on its shoulders to be able to pull off where it needs to springboard from here. But if you're looking for a mystery type show that I will not spoil right now, I think this might have probably the best pilot I watched of 2022. For that reason, it is going to go just above War of the Worlds. Partially because I think it deserves to go there, and also partially because I enjoy making certain classic literary snobs go. Octavia Butler's Kindred, easily the best villain in Rufus of 2022 for me. Detestable to their core while being so human, Nurse Ratchet type vibes. Where you at? This book broke my heart. This book made me love and hate the protagonist while understanding all the decisions they make that I disagree with. It is probably the most impressive display I have read from Octavia Butler, and I loved it. It's going to go just above Elden Ring for me. God, Elden Ring was just a canvas of art from beginning to end, and Octavia Butler's Kindred is a canvas of trauma from beginning to end. Uzumaki! I made it well known in my deep dive of this that I liked the spoops provided. Mostly, there were definitely certain vignettes within that didn't work for me, but overall, definitely a worthwhile experiment. Very similar to Chainsaw Man in that experience for me as a reader, being just something I hadn't really had before, and I loved it for that reason. But from my enjoyment perspective, there were entire vignettes you could pull on out, and I think it would be improved as a whole. Feel free to disagree with me, but Uzumaki for me is going to go just above Sandman. Then we have Volume 3 of Love, Death, Robots. This is a show I have such an interesting relationship with because Volume 1 of Love, Death, Robots, one of my favorite anthologies of all time in terms of TV shows, and then Volume 2 I think was a significant step down, though I didn't hate it. Volume 3 has kind of stepped up into that middle territory. I think it even has my favorite of the short stories that Love, Death, Robots has ever put forward, but it also has my least favorite, something I think is worse than anything in Volume 2, that serves basically no purpose aside from being like vaguely existential horror with some kind of nice visuals, and then everything else within it just completely falls flat. That being said though, I love that Love, Death, Robots exists because it's probably within my favorite vein of fantasy or science fiction. Short stories have been so core to these genres, all the way back to their foundations, to the sci-fi magazines that would put out stuff from the greats of the classic era, of course to things like Twilight Zone. It's so important that I think we keep this type of storytelling alive, where you let creatives not have the burden of developing a massive story, even something novella length, but just putting out something that's super digestible, an interesting concept, and then adding in some of the best animators to bring that to life. Hell yeah, even the worst Love, Death, Robots short, I'm glad it's there. But for overall enjoyment, if I'm being perfectly honest, it just goes top of B. Don't get me wrong, the short written by Joe Abercrombie is probably my favorite Love, Death, Robots ever, and the one directed by David Fincher is just visually spectacular, but there are again some ones in there where I'm like, bleh. I never reviewed it, but I did do one character tier list video for it. I watched all of Buffy throughout 2022, and I liked it. I enjoy schlock. This is super influential pinnacle schlock. The guy who created it sucks balls, not in a good way. It has major faults as a show, but it's one of those shows that you kind of love it because of its faults at times. It has maybe the worst mother in television history. Fight me, Joyce Defenders. And it's also part of the reason why I decided to put vampires in the next book I'm writing, because I just saw so many interesting angles I'd like to take vampires that were inspired by some of the ideas that were touched on within Buffy. I'm gonna put it for overall enjoyment for mid B, but there's definitely a part of my brain that's like, some of those characters, they're S for me. Vinland Saga! Vinland Saga is something I haven't put out a video for in a minute, and I apologize. The views just started to tank there, and I want to reapproach something I'll do in 2023, the series as a whole, try and do something a bit different and special for it, because I think it deserves that. I'm really loving the Vinland Saga story, and it might be the smartest story narratively I have read in manga yet, in terms of how it's positioning players, setting up tension and dynamics, where I really don't know where things are going to go, and that fascinates me. One of my favorite things for Berserk is on a character level, I don't really know where things are going to go, but on narratively, as soon as a villain is set up, I'm like, okay, it's going to have that formula Berserk often does. Vinland Saga is like this continual ongoing development of character where they're all so specific and so well felt out that I don't know where they're going to step next, because like with real people, next steps are really hard to define and predict sometimes. There's also already been some reveals that just blow my mind, so I don't love it as much as Berserk overall, but no, ironically, I actually think, no, I did enjoy it more than Children of Dune, but I don't think I liked it as much as Dune Messiah, though I do get those two books flipped in my head. It's amongst the Dooney worms. And then finishing off 2022, we have House of the Dragoon. Probably the best fantasy live action release of 2022. Holy God, that this show hit. There are individual scenes and some creative narrative choices differing from the source material to criticize. They're few and far between, and it just feels like a return to form to adapting the A Song of Ice and Fire world. I enjoy it so much on so many levels, and the acting and writing alone throughout, just not action scenes, dialogue scenes, elevated to S tier easily. And whoa, some stars from this show I'm going to be following the careers of forever now and going back to watch everything they've done. Patty, I just want to see what you're going to bring to any script you've been involved with. It's so impressive what he did with Viserys. Emma Darcy, new celebrity crush. Also, Matt Smith, I've seen you as the Doctor, but now I love you in a very disturbing way I don't want to analyze. For me, House of the Dragon is going to go just below Kindred. That seems like good placement for me. And now we need to do any cleanup. And this video is sponsored by Ridge. Ridge wallets provide a compact and easy to clean, which is personally my favorite part of it, alternative to traditional wallets. They also offer a really nice key case that'll stop your keys from jingle jangling. I just realized I stopped for a sound effect that's not going to be there. By simply going to ridge.com/green, you can pick up one of these sleek and minimalist wallets with all kinds of fun designs that really are able to take what traditionally would be a big, thick, bulky wallet and bring it on down. So with using my link in the description down below, you can get up to 40% off your Ridge wallet until December 22nd. Actually, no, I don't think there's anything there I need to shift around. I stand by that with my enjoyment. It's my personal enjoyment. You can't tell me I'm wrong, though please do in the comments down below. That will help with the algorithm. And it's been a phenomenal 2022 in terms of overall content, if you can't tell by how much the S tier is stacked, with some notable disappointments. If you'd like to go ahead and snatch one of these bookmarks, go ahead and check out the Kickstarter linked down below. They are going at a surprising rate. The top tier is already sold out. And like and subscribe if you have not already. I look forward to 2023, where I will be doing some longer form deep dives, like trying to summarize all of Mistborn, some Malazan, Warhammer 40k. It's gonna be a ride. But most importantly of all, I hope you're all having a wonderful close to year. Thank you so much for everything you've provided for me, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.